Here was the buzzing in my ears, the echo of Rachel's words repeating in my mind. "You cheated on him, Emily. You lied to everyone." My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of it. The accusation made no sense. It wasn't true. I hadn't cheated on anyone, at least not in the way she was implying. But I knew Rachel. I knew her better than anyone. And I knew she wouldn't say something like that unless there was something she wanted to hurt me with. But why? What had happened between us? The rest of the ceremony passed in a blur. I don't remember walking back to my seat. I don't remember shaking hands with the dean or receiving my diploma. The only thing I could focus on was that moment, that accusation, and the way Rachel had looked at me when she said it. It was like I was looking at a stranger. After the ceremony, I couldn't find Rachel anywhere. She wasn't at the after party. She wasn't at the family gathering. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, leaving me to deal with the fallout alone. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and hurt. I tried to reach out to her, called, texted, emailed, but she ignored every attempt. It was like she had made her decision, and I was the last person on earth she wanted to speak to. But I couldn't let it go. I needed to know why she did this to me. Why, on the most important day of my life, did she decide to publicly destroy me? The more I thought about it, the more I realized there had to be more to this than I understood. This wasn't just a random outburst. She wasn't acting on a whim. She was hiding something dark, something that had to do with the past. But what? I spent days digging into every corner of her life, going back through old photos, messages, anything I could find. And what I uncovered shocked me. There was a secret that she had been hiding from me for years, something so deep, so personal, that it made me question everything I thought I knew about her. And that secret was the key to everything. But how far was I willing to go to uncover the truth? How far would I go to make her pay for what she had done? I spent the next few days locked in a whirlwind of confusion and frustration. Rachel was nowhere to be found. Her apartment was empty, her phone voicemail was full, and all her social media accounts were either locked or abandoned. It was like she had disappeared from the world, leaving only the mess she had created behind. I kept going back to that moment, the way she had looked at me when she accused me of cheating. The anger in her eyes wasn't just about some small grievance. It was deep, personal. She had known something I didn't, something I should have known. But what? What could it possibly be? The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that this wasn't just a random outburst. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. There was a story here, one that had been hidden for a long time, and it was a story I had to uncover, no matter the cost. One evening, after hours of scrolling through old photos and texts, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was an old group photo from a family gathering, years ago. Rachel was standing next to my ex-boyfriend, Aaron. I had forgotten all about him. We had been together for almost 2 years, but we broke up right before my senior year of college. I had moved on, and honestly, I hadn't thought about him much since then. But there was something in that photo, something that caught my eye. Rachel and Aaron were standing too close together. It was just a picture, but the way their bodies were angled, the way they were looking at each other, it was intimate. I zoomed in on the photo, heart pounding in my chest. Had Rachel been seeing Aaron behind my back? Did she betray me with him? The thought made me sick. But it was the only thing that made sense now. I spent the next several hours retracing every moment of that relationship. The times I had questioned Rachel's strange behavior, her odd comments when I was with Aaron, the way she seemed overly concerned when we fought. Now, looking back, it all made sense. I was being played. But the question remained. Why would she go this far? Why expose me in front of everyone, on the one day that was supposed to be about me? Determined to get answers, I decided to confront Rachel. I knew it was risky. This wasn't just some trivial family disagreement. This was a betrayal on a level I hadn't even imagined. But if I didn't do this now, I would never know the truth. I tracked her down to a small cafe near the edge of town, a place we used to visit when we were younger. The minute I walked in, I spotted her sitting by the window, staring out at the street. She didn't see me at first, and for a moment, I almost turned around and walked out. I wasn't sure I was ready for whatever was coming next, but then she looked up. Our eyes met, and the air between us felt thick with unspoken words. She didn't smile, didn't wave. She just sat there, watching me, as if she were waiting for me to make the first move. I took a deep breath and walked over, sitting across from her. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything that had happened hung heavily between us. My mind raced, trying to find the words to express how hurt and betrayed I felt. How could she have done this to me? Finally, I spoke. "Rachel, what was that about at my graduation? Why did you do that?" My voice was shaky, but I couldn't help it. "You accused me of cheating. With Aaron. What's going on?" Rachel's eyes flickered, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms, as if she were preparing for some sort of battle. She wasn't going to give me the satisfaction of an easy answer. "You really want to know?" she asked, her tone low, almost bitter. I nodded. "Yes, I want to understand. Why would you destroy my life like that?" For a moment I thought she might break. I thought she might apologize, confess, and admit everything. But instead she just shook her head, almost with pity. "You've always been the perfect little Emily, haven't you? The golden child. The one who gets everything handed to her on a silver platter." Her voice was cold now. "Do you even realize how much you've hurt me?" I blinked, stunned. "What are you talking about? I've never hurt you. I don't even know what you mean." Rachel leaned forward, her eyes darkening. "You've never noticed, have you? I've been in the shadows, always second best. You were the one who got all the attention, all the praise, and I was just there, invisible." She paused, her jaw tightening. "But Aaron? He saw me, he noticed me, and for once I felt like I mattered." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I felt the air leave my lungs as I processed what Rachel had just said. She wasn't just angry because of something I had done to her in the past. This wasn't about jealousy over my achievements. This went deeper. This was about her feelings of being invisible, unimportant. "You're saying this is about Aaron?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "You did all of this because of him?" Rachel's eyes hardened. "Yes, I thought I could get his attention, but you kept him all to yourself. You were always in the way." Her voice shook with frustration. "But it wasn't just Aaron. It was everything. I was tired of being in your shadow, tired of being the one who no one noticed. I wanted to be seen. I wanted revenge. And when I found out about your little secret..." She trailed off, her gaze dropping to the table. I could see the regret in her eyes. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done. "You've ruined everything," I whispered, feeling the sting of betrayal. "You've torn this family apart." For the first time, Rachel seemed to flinch. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but no words came out. She wasn't sorry. Not really. She was just angry. Angry at me, at the world, and at herself. As I sat there listening to Rachel's words, something inside me hardened. I had never wanted to hurt my sister. I had always protected her, always loved her. But now I realized that everything I had ever done for her had been in vain. Her betrayal was not just a betrayal of me. It was a betrayal of everything we had shared, everything I had tried to protect. I stood up, my fists clenched, my mind made up. It wasn't just about understanding her pain anymore. It wasn't about seeking redemption or forgiveness. It was about justice. I was done being the victim. Now, it was time to make Rachel understand what it felt like to be exposed, to be broken in front of the people you love. The days after my confrontation with Rachel were filled with tension. The air between us had become thick with unspoken words. I knew that she was still angry. Hell, I was too. But I couldn't just sit by and let her tear apart everything I had worked for. I had to do something. The problem was, I wasn't sure how far I was willing to go. Revenge had never been my style. I wasn't the kind of person who played dirty. But Rachel's betrayal was on another level. She didn't just cross a line, she burned it to the ground. After spending countless hours stewing over my options, the answer came to me one evening while I was scrolling through old family photos. It wasn't just about confronting her anymore. I needed to expose her, to show the world what kind of person she really was. She'd done it to me. It was time for me to turn the tables. It wasn't going to be easy. Rachel had always been the more manipulative of us two. She knew how to twist things in her favor, how to get what she wanted without anyone suspecting a thing. But I had something she didn't, the truth. And sometimes, the truth is more dangerous than any lie. I started by gathering all the evidence I could find: text, messages, emails, old conversations between Rachel and Aaron. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the more I dug, the more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Rachel had been lying to me for years. She had been playing both sides, pretending to be my supportive older sister while secretly sabotaging my relationships and making me the villain in her twisted little story. I didn't know exactly how I was going to use this information yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time before Rachel would regret what she'd done. The night of the family gathering was when everything would come to a head. It had been weeks since Rachel's outburst at my graduation, and I had spent every moment since then planning my move. It wasn't going to be some grand gesture. It wasn't going to be something I could walk away from with a sense of moral victory. No, this was about delivering justice on my terms. I walked into the living room, my hands shaking only slightly as I held a file in front of me. The room was filled with the usual chatter of my extended family. My parents were sitting by the fireplace, and everyone else was gathered around, enjoying the food and the wine. Rachel was there too, of course, sitting at the back, her face hidden in the shadows. She had no idea what was coming. I took a deep breath, walking to the center of the room. My parents stopped talking, sensing something was off. The tension in the air was palpable. My heart was racing, but I knew I had to go through with it. There was no turning back now. "Everyone, I have something I need to show you," I said, my voice steady but cold. The room fell silent. Rachel's eyes widened as she stood up from her chair. "Emily, what are you doing?" she demanded, trying to mask the panic creeping into her voice. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked over to the coffee table, where I placed the folder in front of my parents. "Mom, Dad, I think you need to see this," I said, opening the folder and revealing the incriminating text messages, photos, and emails between Rachel and Aaron. The room went completely still. The only sound was the faint rustling of paper as I laid it all out. Rachel's face turned ghostly white. "You don't understand," she began, her voice cracking. "This isn't what it looks like." But I wasn't listening. I was done listening. "You knew all along, didn't you?" I said, my eyes never leaving her. "You knew what you were doing, manipulating everyone around you. You wanted Aaron, you wanted everything I had. And you destroyed me for it." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents, who had always seen Rachel as the perfect child, the one who could do no wrong, were staring at her with disbelief. It was as if a veil had been lifted from their eyes. They finally saw her for who she truly was, a liar, a manipulator, and someone who had caused irreparable damage to their family. Rachel stood frozen, her arms trembling. "Emily, please. Don't do this," she pleaded, her voice barely a whisper. "I never meant for things to go this far. I was hurt. You were always the one everyone loved more. I just wanted to feel seen." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had always been so lost in her jealousy, her need for validation, that she'd never stopped to think about the consequences of her actions. But then I remembered everything she had done, everything she had put me through. I couldn't back down now. Not after everything. "I didn't destroy you, Rachel. You did this to yourself," I said firmly, my voice cold as ice. "You wanted revenge. You wanted to hurt me. And now you've got it." The fallout from that night was as expected, devastating. My parents, though shocked and hurt, understood the truth. They were upset, yes, but they also saw how Rachel had played them, how she had manipulated every situation to suit her own selfish desires. She had torn apart everything I'd worked so hard for, and now the truth was out. There was no going back for her. Rachel left that night, her pride and anger leading her out of the house without another word. I didn't chase her. There was nothing more to say. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. In the weeks that followed, Rachel tried to reach out to me. She sent texts, left voicemails, even showed up at my door once, but I didn't let her back into my life. The sister I once knew was gone, replaced by a person I could no longer trust. As for me, I spent a lot of time reflecting on the lessons I had learned through all of this. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the revenge. It all made me realize something important. No one can control your story except you. People will always try to tear you down, to hurt you when they're hurting themselves, but in the end, it's up to you how you respond. In my case, I chose to stand up. I chose to expose the truth. And while it wasn't easy, it was necessary. Rachel's actions couldn't go unchallenged. She had to see the damage she caused, and I had to reclaim my life. When everything settles down, you're left with the quiet aftermath. The noise of the battle fades, and you have to sit with yourself and ask, was it worth it? I don't know. Honestly, I don't. But what I do know is that I am no longer a victim. I've learned that sometimes, the only way to protect yourself is to take control of your own narrative. Revenge wasn't about winning or losing. It was about showing Rachel, and the world, that I wouldn't be broken, that I wouldn't let someone tear me down to make themselves feel better. If there's one lesson I can take from all of this, it's that betrayal comes in many forms. Sometimes it's from the people you least expect. But in the end, we have the power to choose how we react. And no matter how hard it gets, we can always rise above. The days that followed that fateful night were anything but easy. The fallout from Rachel's betrayal, the confrontation in front of our parents, and the subsequent aftermath left a gaping wound in the fabric of our family. It was as though the very foundation of our relationship had been shattered, and no amount of time could heal it. I had always thought of Rachel as someone I could count on, someone who would be there for me no matter what. But after everything that had unfolded, I realized how little I truly knew her. My entire life, she had been playing a role, smiling when she needed to, laughing when it suited her, but behind that facade, there was a well of resentment that I had never seen coming. I often replayed that night in my head, searching for answers, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. When had she started resenting me? When had she started seeing me as a threat rather than a sister? Had there been signs all along that I missed? I couldn't stop asking myself these questions. I felt like I had been blind to everything happening right under my nose. But now, in the quiet aftermath, it was clear that Rachel had been consumed by jealousy, by her need to be seen, to be noticed, to matter in a way that I had never realized. And it wasn't just about Aaron anymore. It was about her inability to handle being in my shadow. She had built a narrative of being the overlooked sister, the one who was never enough. And somewhere along the way, she had convinced herself that I was the reason she felt invisible. I spent a lot of time reflecting on our past. I remembered the way Rachel had always been there for me, always offering advice, helping me with school projects, and even stepping in when I needed a shoulder to cry on. But looking back, I realized that there had been a pattern in her actions. She never truly wanted to help me. She always wanted to outdo me, to be the one who was praised, who was loved. I had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. But now I saw how deeply Rachel resented that. In a way, I felt sorry for her. She had lived with that jealousy for so long, and it had consumed her. But at the same time, I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Not yet, anyway. The betrayal had cut too deep, and the damage she had caused couldn't be undone with a simple apology. The trust that had been built over years was gone, replaced by anger and disbelief. I spent my days in a fog of confusion and frustration. I couldn't understand why Rachel had gone so far. Why did she have to humiliate me, embarrass me in front of everyone I knew? Did she truly think that would fix things between us? Or was it that she just wanted to see me fall? But it wasn't just Rachel's actions that weighed heavily on me. It was the realization that I had never truly seen her for who she was. I had always put her on a pedestal, believing she was my protector, my ally. But in the end, she wasn't. She had torn me down in front of everyone, and there was no going back from that. As the days passed, I became more and more consumed with the need to understand what had pushed Rachel to do what she did. Was it something I had done? Had I unknowingly driven her to this point? I thought back to everything we had been through, every fight, every misunderstanding, and every moment of sibling rivalry. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I hadn't done anything to deserve this. It wasn't me, it was her, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. In the weeks that followed, I tried to move on, to focus on my own healing, but it wasn't as simple as just letting go. The emotional weight of Rachel's betrayal hung over me like a cloud, following me everywhere I went. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been completely blindsided. I avoided places where I knew Rachel would be. Our family gatherings became tense, awkward affairs. My parents, who had always been the glue holding us together, were now struggling to understand how everything had gone so wrong. They wanted to fix things, to get us to reconcile, but it wasn't that easy. They didn't understand the depth of the hurt Rachel had caused. They didn't know what it was like to be humiliated by the one person who was supposed to have your back. At first, I tried to tell myself that time would heal all wounds, that eventually Rachel would come to her senses, apologize, and things would go back to normal. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks turned into months, I realized that nothing was going to be the same again. The sister I had known was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. The worst part was that I didn't know if I would ever be able to trust her again. How could I? She had taken the most important day of my life and turned it into a nightmare. She had thrown our entire relationship away for the sake of her own ego, and I couldn't just forget that. I wanted to believe that Rachel was still in there somewhere, the sister who had always been there for me, the one who had shared my joys and sorrows. But now, I wasn't so sure. Could someone who had hurt you so deeply ever be the same person again? I spent countless nights lying awake in bed, replaying the events in my mind, wondering if I had done something to push her away. I wanted answers, closure. But no matter how much I thought about it, I couldn't find the reason for what she had done. I couldn't understand the betrayal. But then, something shifted inside me. I realized that I didn't need to understand. I didn't need to have all the answers. What mattered was that I had to let go of the need for closure. Rachel's actions were hers alone, and I couldn't carry the weight of her mistakes any longer. I had spent enough time wondering why, and it was time to focus on myself, on my own healing. I started to distance myself from the pain she had caused. I focused on my friends, on my career, on my own growth. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I still thought about what happened. But slowly, I began to realize that I didn't need her to be whole. I didn't need her to validate my existence. I could be enough on my own. The world doesn't stop turning just because your life has been turned upside down. I learned that the hard way. In the weeks following Rachel's betrayal, life continued on, indifferent to the storm raging inside me. Friends still invited me out, work demanded my attention, and the world outside my family still required my presence. But all I could focus on was the jagged hole Rachel had left in my heart. I wasn't angry anymore. I had moved past the raw fury that had initially consumed me. The days after the confrontation had been filled with white-hot rage that I poured into every corner of my life. But now I was left with something different, something colder. The grief. At first, I didn't know how to deal with it. Grief isn't just for loss, it's for betrayal too. It's the feeling of having someone you love and trust turn away from you, leaving you feeling hollow and exposed. It's the shock that comes with realizing that someone you would have done anything for has abandoned you. The worst part wasn't the hurt, it was the confusion, the self-doubt that crept in when I questioned if I'd done something wrong to deserve this. I knew better than to keep my emotions bottled up, but the idea of confronting them head-on terrified me. I didn't want to face the pain. I didn't want to admit that the person who had hurt me most was the one I had trusted the most. And I certainly didn't want to deal with the fact that Rachel and I, the sisters who had been so close for so many years, might never be the same again. But then, in a quiet moment of reflection, something shifted inside me. I remembered the person I used to be, the one who stood tall in the face of adversity, the person who refused to let anyone define her worth. That person was still inside me, buried beneath the weight of Rachel's betrayal. And it was time to let her out again. I took a deep breath and decided to focus on the things that I could control. I couldn't control Rachel's actions, nor could I change the past, but I could change how I responded to it, and for the first time in months, I made the decision to reclaim my peace. I signed up for yoga. It wasn't something I had ever really been interested in, but I had heard it was great for both the body and mind. I figured it couldn't hurt to try something new, something that could help me reconnect with myself and give me some space to think. The first few classes were hard. I felt awkward and out of place, but I stuck with it. Slowly I began to feel my body respond to the stretching and breathing exercises. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe, really breathe, without that suffocating weight on my chest. The more I practiced, the more I started to see the connection between mind and body. I wasn't just doing yoga for my body, I was doing it for my soul. It became a ritual, one that allowed me to take control of my emotions, to release the bitterness, and to process the pain Rachel had caused without letting it consume me. Every time I stretched into a downward dog or held a warrior pose, I imagined myself pushing away the weight of the past. Each movement was like letting go of a little piece of the hurt she had inflicted. But it wasn't just yoga that helped me heal. I started taking better care of myself in every way I could. I ate healthier, spent more time outdoors, and rekindled friendships that had fallen to the wayside over the years. I reconnected with old friends who had always been there for me, and they offered the kind of support I hadn't realized I needed. I began to realize that healing wasn't a linear process. There were days when the pain crept back in, when the memories of Rachel's betrayal felt too heavy to carry. But those days were fewer and farther between as I focused on moving forward rather than looking back. One evening, as I walked through the park near my apartment, something shifted in me. I realized that I had been so focused on the pain Rachel had caused that I had forgotten to focus on the future I was building for myself. I had spent so long trying to fix a relationship that couldn't be fixed right now that I had neglected my own growth. I stopped by a bench and sat for a moment, the cool evening air washing over me. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the horizon. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt at peace. I wasn't fully healed yet, but I was getting there, and that was enough for now. One day, months later, I found myself in a position I never thought I would be in. I had to decide whether I was ready to forgive Rachel. It wasn't something I had planned on doing, not after everything she had put me through. I still felt the sting of her betrayal, and the anger I had once felt still simmered beneath the surface. But something in me had changed. I realized that forgiveness wasn't for Rachel. It wasn't about excusing her behavior or pretending that everything was okay. It wasn't about her at all. Forgiveness, I understood now, was for me. It was about releasing myself from the chains of resentment and moving forward with my life, free of the bitterness that had held me hostage for so long. That night, I sat down to write a letter to Rachel. I didn't know if she would ever read it, or if it would ever make a difference, but I needed to say the things I hadn't been able to say before. I needed to release the anger and the hurt. Dear Rachel, I don't know where to begin, or even if you'll ever read this, but I need to say what's been weighing on me for so long. I don't know why you did what you did. I don't know why. You chose to hurt me the way you did. But I do know that what you did was wrong, and it's taken me a long time to come to terms with that. I want you to know that I'm not angry anymore. I'm sad, and I'm hurt, but I'm not angry. And maybe one day, you'll understand the impact of your actions, not just on me, but on everything we had as sisters. I'm learning to heal. I'm learning to forgive, not for you, but for me, because I can't carry this weight anymore. I've spent too long drowning in the bitterness of what you did. I'm letting it go now. I hope you find the peace you're searching for, and I hope one day you realize what you've lost. Goodbye, Emily. I mailed the letter, not expecting a response. I wasn't doing it for her after all. I was doing it for me. It was time to close that chapter of my life, to free myself from the lingering ghost of our relationship. Weeks passed and nothing came. No message, no call. And for the first time, I realized that I was okay with that. Sometimes closure doesn't come from the other person. Sometimes it comes from within. And that was the moment I understood that I was no longer bound by Rachel's actions. I was free to live my life, to move forward, to embrace the future without looking back. Life has a way of moving forward, no matter how much you want to stay stuck in a particular chapter. I had spent months navigating the wreckage Rachel left behind, but the more time passed, the more I realized that my life could be something new, something better. The past was still there, but it no longer had the power to control me. I had learned to live with it, and in that process, I learned something I hadn't expected. I was stronger than I had ever known. I spent the next few months reclaiming parts of myself I had buried for too long. I signed up for a painting class, something I had always wanted to try but never found the time for. I had forgotten how much joy creativity could bring, until I stood in front of an easel, brush in hand, and let my mind wander onto the canvas. The first few paintings were messy, chaotic, even embarrassing, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was creating again, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was truly living. My yoga practice continued to evolve too. It wasn't just about the physical postures anymore. It had become a meditation, a ritual that centered me and reminded me of my own resilience. With each deep breath, I began to heal the fractures within myself, and as the days went on, I felt more connected to my body and soul than I ever had before. I also focused on building stronger, healthier relationships with the people who had been there for me during the darkest parts of this journey. Friends who had shown up without question, who had offered a listening ear or just a shoulder to cry on. They had become my support system, the ones I leaned on when I needed to feel heard, to feel validated. I made an effort to nurture these relationships, and in turn, they helped me grow. But most importantly, I learned how to let go of the things that no longer served me. I realized that the resentment I had carried towards Rachel wasn't just a burden I had been carrying for her. It was one I had been carrying for myself. Holding on to anger, onto the idea that someone else's actions could dictate my happiness was like carrying a weight around my neck. It was heavy, suffocating, and I didn't need it anymore. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my apartment watching the sunset, I thought about everything that had happened. The betrayal, the heartache, the confrontation, and the painful journey of healing. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short time. The girl who had walked into that graduation ceremony with a heart full of excitement and a mind full of dreams had been replaced by someone different. Someone stronger, wiser, and more grounded in her own truth. And while I would never forget the pain Rachel had caused me, I also knew I had learned something invaluable from it. I had learned that people can hurt you, betray you, and disappoint you, but you are the one who gets to decide how you move forward. I had allowed myself to be a victim for too long, but no more. I was taking control of my own narrative. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, the pain of the past seemed to fade just a little more. I had embraced my new life, my newfound peace. But just when I thought I had closed the door on the past, something unexpected happened. One evening, as I sat in the living room reading a book, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I glanced at the screen, expecting another message from a friend or a work-related email. But what I saw instead left me momentarily speechless. It was a text from Rachel. "Emily, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to try to make things right. I've had a lot of time to think, and I know I hurt you deeply. I'm sorry. I don't expect anything from you, but I hope that someday we can talk. Maybe we can begin to heal what I broke. Rachel." I stared at the message for a long time, the words swirling in my mind. I hadn't heard from Rachel in months, and the silence had been heavy, like a void between us. And now, here she was, reaching out, attempting to mend a bridge that I had long since burned. At first, my heart skipped a beat. A part of me wanted to jump at the chance to rebuild what we had, to believe that time could heal the wounds Rachel had inflicted. But another part of me was hesitant, cautious. I had worked so hard to get to where I was now, to find peace without needing her validation. Could I really open myself up again, to someone who had shattered my trust so completely? I set my phone down for a moment, letting the silence settle around me. The room felt heavy, the weight of the decision pressing on me. I wasn't sure what I wanted. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to tell her that I was ready to move forward, to heal the rift between us. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt so badly, wasn't sure if I could. I knew that forgiveness wasn't about her. It was about me and how I chose to move forward. But the idea of opening that door again, of allowing Rachel back into my life, felt like an emotional minefield. Over the next few days, I thought long and hard about Rachel's message. I talked to my friends, sought advice, but ultimately, I knew this decision was mine to make. I had come so far on my own, and I had built a life for myself that I was proud of. But I also knew that carrying this weight of unresolved pain wouldn't help me grow. So, I made the decision to meet with Rachel. It wasn't about reconciliation for the sake of our past. It wasn't about rekindling some idealized sisterhood that no longer existed. No, this meeting would be about closure, about giving ourselves the space to say what we needed to say. and to finally let go of the past once and for all. I arranged to meet her at a cafe, a neutral place, somewhere we wouldn't be disturbed. I showed up early, as I always did, and sat down at a table by the window. The warmth of the sun filled the room, and I felt the calmness of the moment settle into my chest. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I felt truly ready for whatever was about to come. Rachel arrived a few minutes later, her expression uncertain. She looked older somehow, her eyes a little more tired, her face drawn. When she saw me, she hesitated, and for a moment, I thought she might turn around and leave. But then she walked toward the table and sat down across from me. We both stared at each other for a few moments, neither of us saying anything. The tension was palpable, but this time it wasn't suffocating. It was the kind of silence that comes before something important. Finally, Rachel spoke. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself." Her voice was quiet, almost fragile. "But I want you to know that I am truly sorry for everything, for what I did, for how I treated you. You deserved so much better." For the first time in a long while, I looked at her, not with anger or resentment, but with understanding. I had no illusions about her sincerity, but I also knew that she was hurting too, and in that moment, I realized that forgiveness wasn't something I had to give to her. It was something I could give to myself. "I know," I said softly, "and I think I'm finally ready to let go. I've been holding on to the hurt for so long, and I can't carry it anymore." Rachel nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for even listening." It's said that closure doesn't always come from a grand gesture or a dramatic confession. Sometimes, it comes quietly, in the unspoken understanding that something has changed. That's exactly how I felt sitting across from Rachel that afternoon in the cafe. No fireworks, no sweeping declarations of love and forgiveness. Just two people, scarred by the past, sitting in the present, ready to take the first step towards something different. As we sat there, the weight of the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt like the quiet before a storm that was necessary but not destructive. We needed this conversation, just as we needed the pain we had endured to come to this point. I couldn't help but look at Rachel and think about everything that had led us here. The years of love and support we had shared, the laughter, the late-night talks, and the moments that had once seemed so important, before jealousy and resentment had poisoned everything. For a long time I had believed that the damage done between us was irreparable, that what Rachel had done was unforgivable. But sitting there, I realized that the only way to move forward was to let go of the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal. Because holding on to them was only keeping me in the past, trapped in a cycle of bitterness. I couldn't allow that to define who I was anymore. I had worked too hard to heal and grow to let the ghosts of my past haunt me forever. Rachel spoke again, her voice shaky but filled with sincerity. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve to be in your life again, but I want to try. I want to be better, Emily. I want to fix what I've broken." The vulnerability in her voice hit me like a wave. I had never heard her speak like this. Rachel had always been so proud, so guarded. To see her so raw, so open, made me wonder if this was the Rachel I had once known, or if the person sitting across from me was someone who had truly changed. I took a deep breath. "Rachel," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I'm not sure what forgiveness looks like for us. I'm not even sure it's something that can happen overnight. But I do know one thing. I can't live in this limbo anymore. I can't hold on to the past if I want to move forward." She nodded, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I understand. I want you to know how sorry I am. Not just for what I did, but for the person I became. I don't even recognize myself sometimes. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was the beginning of something new. But I also knew that trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt in a single conversation. It would take time to heal the wounds, time to prove that things could change. The most difficult part of the conversation wasn't the words spoken. It was the space between them, the unspoken tension, the things left unsaid, the emotions we both carried that we didn't quite know how to articulate. This wasn't just about saying "I'm sorry" or "I forgive you." This was about rebuilding a connection that had been shattered, about navigating a sea of emotions neither of us had ever fully understood until now. As I sat there with Rachel, I realized that I was no longer the same person I had been when the betrayal first occurred. I had grown. I had learned that healing was not a destination, but a journey that was sometimes slow, painful, and filled with setbacks. But the important part was that I had taken the first steps and I wasn't looking back. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel burdened by resentment. I didn't feel like I was carrying Rachel's mistakes on my shoulders. I could see her for who she was now, not the sister who betrayed me, but the sister who was genuinely trying to make amends. Maybe we can't fix everything right away, I said quietly. But we can start small. We can start by being honest with each other, by not running away from the hard stuff. Rachel nodded, a single tear slipping down her cheek. I'd like that. We sat together for a while longer, talking about everything and nothing. It felt strange, yet comforting. We didn't resolve all our issues in that one meeting. How could we? But for the first time in a long while, I felt like there was a glimmer of hope between us. When we left the cafe, I didn't feel like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders, but I did feel lighter. I had allowed myself to see Rachel differently, not as the person who had betrayed me, but as the person she was now, a person who had made mistakes, who was still growing, and who was willing to try to make things right. I knew it wouldn't be easy. Healing never is. But I was no longer afraid of the process. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't a one-time act. It was a continuous journey, one that would require patience, understanding, and, most importantly, trust. I couldn't rush it, and I couldn't force it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt okay with that. As weeks turned into months, Rachel and I began to rebuild our relationship slowly. We didn't force things. We took the time to talk, to be honest with each other, and to understand the deep pain that had caused the rift between us. We had been sisters, best friends, and then strangers. But now, we were learning how to be something new, something fragile, something real. We started small, text messages, phone calls, weekend visits. But each small step brought us closer to something more. We still had a long way to go, but I was no longer afraid of the journey. I knew that, for the first time, Rachel was genuinely trying, and that made all the difference. I could finally say that I was at peace, not just with Rachel, but with myself. I had found the strength to forgive, to heal, and to move forward, and in doing so, I had reclaimed my life, my sense of self. It wasn't just Rachel I had to forgive. It was myself. For so long, I had carried the weight of her betrayal, convinced that I was somehow to blame for everything that had happened. I had let my guilt and my shame cloud my judgment, making me believe that if I had been different, maybe things would have turned out differently. But now, I knew that wasn't true. Rachel had made her choices, and I had made mine, and the most powerful thing I could do for myself was to stop carrying the burden of her mistakes. As the days passed, I became more and more aware of how much I had changed. I wasn't the same person I had been at the beginning of this journey. I had shed the anger and the hurt that had held me back for so long, and in doing so, I had become stronger. I had learned that the past, no matter how painful, did not have to define me. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't just for the people who hurt you, it was for you too. The months that followed Rachel's apology were not without their challenges. There were times when the old wounds would resurface, moments when I questioned whether I had made the right choice in reopening the door to her. But in those quiet moments of doubt, I would remind myself of how far I had come. The truth was, I had changed, and that was something no one, especially not Rachel, could take away from me. I had learned to let go of the past, not by forgetting it, but by accepting it for what it was. I had learned that the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it didn't define me. What defined me was how I chose to move forward, how I chose to reclaim my life and my peace. Reconciliation with Rachel didn't mean that everything was suddenly perfect. There were still awkward silences, unspoken words, and painful reminders of the past. But there was also understanding, vulnerability, and most importantly, the willingness to try again. And that was enough. Over time, our relationship slowly began to shift. We were no longer the sisters who had shared every secret, every dream, every moment of joy. But we were becoming something new. We were learning how to build trust again, piece by piece, day by day. It was a process, one that would take years to fully heal, but it was a start. One evening, Rachel called me to check in. It had been a few months since we'd last spoken in person, and it felt like the right moment for a deeper conversation. She asked if I was ready to meet again, this time without the weight of the past hanging over us. Without the anger, without the betrayal. I agreed. When I walked into the cafe where we agreed to meet, I felt an unexpected calm. This time, there was no tension, no nervousness. We had both done the work to get here. And although we didn't have all the answers, we both understood that this was the beginning of a new chapter. Not just for our relationship, but for our individual lives as well. Sitting across from Rachel, I realized something that took me by surprise. I no longer needed her to apologize, to make up for what she had done. I had already forgiven her, and in doing so, I had forgiven myself. "Do you think we can ever go back to the way things were?" Rachel asked, her voice tentative, unsure. I smiled gently, a sense of peace settling in my chest. "No," I said softly, "but maybe that's okay. Maybe what we have now can be something even better." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm willing to try." And that was all I needed to hear. As time passed, I continued to grow, both in my personal life and in my relationship with Rachel. Our interactions were no longer marked by the heavy shadow of the past. We began to understand each other in ways we never had before. We had both been scarred, but we were also stronger for it. In the meantime, I embraced new opportunities in my own life. I threw myself into my work, my creative passions, and my friendships. I discovered new sides of myself that I hadn't known existed, the confident, self-assured woman who had learned to value herself, despite the trials and betrayals she had faced. The journey had not been easy, but it had been necessary. I knew now that I wasn't defined by what happened to me, but by how I responded to it. I had faced betrayal head-on, and instead of allowing it to break me, I allowed it to reshape me into someone more resilient, more compassionate, and more whole. One day, as I sat by the window, looking out at the world passing by, I realized that I had let go of the chains of the past. I wasn't waiting for something or someone to come and fix me. I had fixed myself. I had found my peace, and I had built a life that was mine, not one dictated by anyone else's actions, but one shaped by my own choices. The person I had been when I walked into that graduation ceremony was gone. She had been replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more self-aware. I had learned to trust myself, to forgive myself, and to stand up for myself when no one else would. And for the first time, I could finally say that I was free, not just from Rachel's betrayal, but from the past that had held me hostage for so long. As I reflect on the journey I've been through, I've come to understand that forgiveness, growth, and healing are not linear processes. There's no clear-cut path, no set timeline for when things get better. Sometimes it takes years to come to terms with the pain. Sometimes it takes even longer to forgive the ones who hurt us most. But in the end, it's not about them. It's about us. It's about choosing to rise above the hurt, choosing to take control of our own narrative. It's about understanding that the power to heal lies within us, not in the hands of the people who wronged us. We have the ability to let go, to move forward, and to build a life that is full of peace, love, and self-respect. I've learned that betrayal is one of life's most painful experiences. It makes us question ourselves, our worth, and our judgment. But it also teaches us something invaluable, that our worth is not defined by how others treat us, but by how we choose to treat ourselves. And no one, no matter how close they are, can take that away from us unless we allow it. As for Rachel and me, I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that the healing process is still ongoing. It's a work in progress. Some days are better than others, and some days are harder, but that's okay. I've learned that there's no rush to heal, no rush to fix everything. Healing takes time, and in the meantime, I'll keep moving forward, embracing the future with an open heart, ready for whatever comes next.